Good day and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at basically how you can gear up your characters as quickly as possible, all the avenues for gear, how to progress, and basically everything you need to know from upgrading to converting set pieces to everything. Now I'm going to assume you have some basic knowledge of the reward tracks, but I will be mentioning and discussing them in detail, so you should be okay. Now the important thing to start off with is world quests. Once you ding level 80, there's a small gap where you do need some gear. World quests are great for this, largely because they help you to fill up certain slots, but on top of that they allow you to target certain areas. They'll drop around 564 to 567 gear, which is the adventurer track, but you should be more than fine. Once you've picked up a couple of these pieces, you'll be sitting at around 520, 540. Then you want to look at picking up your weekly caches. Now it's important to understand that there are multiple weekly caches in the game. You get your weekly chest, which is the pinnacle cache. You get a weekly chest or weekly cache from each of the zone events. So that's Awakening the Machine, the Theater Troop, the Radiant cache from Hellafall, and the Pact cache from completing the Pact quests in Azkajet. You also have a random adventurers cache that will spawn in each zone once every couple of days and twice per week. All of these are all veteran track rewards, which is 584 gear that can be upgraded, and all of these are basically shared. For that character, you can only get gear from the first 2 caches of the week. So if you do weekly Pinnacle cache, and then you do your Radiant cache, then there you go, you've got your 2 pieces. Now you should still do all of them. The reason being is quite simple. Firstly, lots of weathered crests, lots of resonance crystals, and you get coffer keys, which you need for the delves, which is very important. But also, it's the Valorstones, it's the gold, it's all the good resources, the renown, etc. that you get from doing them as well. So you should do them even beyond the first 2. It's a very, very important method, basically, of obtaining some good rewards, and especially the coffer keys, which will play a big part into delves, which is the major solo content for gaining gear and ranking your character up. So that's the weekly caches. From there you'll get 2 veteran pieces, but the only last method that's kind of outside of instance is world bosses. Now world bosses spawn once per week. Each character has 1 attempt per the world boss for the weekly drop. The world boss quest will drop a 577 approximate piece of gear, which is an adventurer rank piece of gear, which is pretty decent, pretty nice, and that's guaranteed. But then you also have the drop. The drop is champion gear, but is not guaranteed, but is pretty nice if it does drop. It's like the equivalent of doing a tier 8 delve. It's very, very cool. So let's talk about delves. So firstly, it's important to note that normal delves will only give you gear up to 554. So doing normal delves loses a lot of interest very quickly. However, bountiful delves from certain tiers will give you gear. So bountiful delves start in tier 1 giving you 561, all the way up to tier 8 giving you 603. Now you can do higher than tier 8, but you won't get increased rewards. In terms of bountiful delves, you can do them once per day per zone. So basically each day you have 4 attempts at grabbing yourself a reward. That reward requires you to have a coffer key. So if you don't have a coffer key, you can't do the bountiful delve. And this is why it's important to do your weekly chests. Each time you complete the delve successfully with less than 5 deaths, you will be able to get your reward, which is a 603 piece of gear from completing the delve. And if you complete 5 bountiful delves within the week, you will get a 616 piece of gear from your vault. So this is pretty good. This is the equivalent of like normal raiding. This is the equivalent of doing around about a Mythic 5, give or take, Mythic 5 or Mythic 6. So it's a pretty decent level of gear. Now there's a couple important things to help you out with delves. So firstly, not all delves are equal. So try and focus on doing the quicker delves, and before you do any bountiful delves, make sure that you can access tier 8 with your character. If you can't do tier 8, go and complete a whole bunch of other delves up until the point where you can do tier 8. The second thing is, if you are failing the delve, feel free to exit. You don't need to complete the delve. You can exit it early and get yourself the rewards pretty early on. If you're failing, just leave so that you don't spend the key. You can always attempt the next day on a different delve if you're not feeling this one. But as long as you've got the keys, you can keep attempting and getting rewards. So it's all very good from that standpoint. And then finally, in terms of Bran, you want Bran to be a damage dealer. Ideally, you want him to be a damage dealer for general purpose of having huge damage. And the best trinkets for him are the Ponderous Arrowhead, I think I've said that right, and the Amorphous Relic. Both of these are very, very crucial towards increasing his overall damage and help you out a lot. Now, we'll talk about delves in a lot more detail in another video, but for gearing purposes, that's pretty much everything you need to know to get yourself started. Next, we have the dungeons. So dungeons are group content. So we're moving past solo stuff. So we've covered all the solo stuff. This is group-based content. Now, dungeons and raids scale. So for dungeons, you go from Mythic 0, which gives you 593 adventure rank gear, all the way up to the max rank at Mythic 10 plus, which is 613 gear in the champion rank, and can give you a 623 piece of gear, which is Mythic rank, from the Great Vault. Now, Mythic 10 plus is very hard. You're not going to get there in one day. I mean, you could if you're really, really good, but you can spam this. So if you've got a good group, if you've got a good guild, if you are just a good player, Mythic Plus is something you can spam. Now, it's not currently open. It opens from the next week, so it opens from the 18th, but it is a good option for players who are looking for more hardcore content. It does require grouping up. You can pug for it. There's going to be plenty of guides for each dungeon. I myself will probably do a couple guides as well, as poor as they may be, but basically, realistically, you really want to do your best to, how can I say, try Mythic Plus if you want to go for big rewards. It's not going to give you as high gear as raiding, but it is the second highest tier of gear that you can get. Of course, the Great Vault and everything is based on your highest run, so you can slowly creep up as long as you keep getting completions, and you will have a time limit on Mythic Plus rank, which will determine your rewards. But generally speaking, Mythic Plus is going to be your second best avenue to the top tier of gear. It's one of the few ways that you can get the Mythic ranking of gear outside of actual raiding. And of course, now we talk about raiding. So there's different types of raiding for everyone. Firstly, there's LFR, which Wing 1 has opened, and you can get 584 adventure gear, all the way up to the rank 600. Normal raids, which require you to pug with groups, can get you all the way up to 613 in the veteran level, and then you get heroic raids, which will give you from 610 to 626, which is a very rare level of drop, but basically to around about 619. And then of course you also have Mythic, which is obviously the highest tier of raiding, requiring very skilled players, and this will drop, of course, the Mythic tier of gear. Now, it's very important to understand that raiding, especially I would say from a heroic and a Mythic standpoint, is end game content. It is not casual content. It is more devoted, dedicated, skilled player content. You usually need an organized group or a guild. Especially for Mythic, you need to have a very organized group, but the rewards are very evident, and you can get a lot of progress by clearing the whole raid each week. Of course, if you're doing LFR, you will only get rewards for that wing, but you can get more rewards from the Great Vault based on essentially the enemy you defeat, and it's tied directly to the enemies you beat. So, for example, if you beat 2 heroic bosses, then you will have the chance to spawn a heroic piece of gear from your slot. If you beat 4 normal bosses and 2 heroic, you will get 1 heroic and 1 normal piece. And that's how it will work, that you can then choose from. So it's a very good method, but it is probably obviously the hardest method. It's not a solo method. It requires you to be a bit dedicated. So very clearly the best method, but it's also the hardest. So yeah. So let's talk very quickly about Valorstones and Crests. So Valorstones, you've heard me mention a little bit throughout the video. These are a very important resource. They come from rares, world quests, raids, Mythic Plus, Snuffling, Handing and Lightbringer satchels, delves, weekly chests, renown. And the Snuffling and the Lightbringer satchels have now been capped as well. But Valorstones are very important because you use them to upgrade your gear within the tier. So for example, if you have a veteran piece of gear that's 584, you can upgrade it to 587, 590, 593, 596. And to do this, you need Valorstones and you need Crests. You also need Valorstones to create things like Sparks of Omen and for other rewards along the way. So Valorstones are very, very important. So our Crests both are incredibly important pieces of currency within War Within. And with Crests, you can also get these. Now, Crests are tied to content and their scale. So for example, if you do lower level dungeons, you get lower level Crests. So I'm just going to mention the highest tier of Crest and what you need them to upgrade. So Weathered Crests are the lowest tier. They're used for adventure gear. You get them mainly from world quests. Weekly caches and renown will give you carved and weathered crests. Carved is used for veteran path gear. Then your delves will give you up to ruined gear, ruined crests, so you get weathered, carved, and ruined. These will allow you to upgrade the hero track gear, but this is obviously only from tier 8 delves. And then dungeons and raids scale all the way up to gilded crests, obviously from Mythic and from Mythic plus 10. So very, very, very high level content there. But these will allow you to upgrade Mythic tier gear. Obviously they scale through, so if you're doing the appropriate content, you'll get the appropriate crests for that level of content that you're doing. So if you're doing heroic raiding, for example, you'll get ruined crests, and that just kind of covers it. So before we talk about upgrading your gear, there are some alternative gear sources that you can use to potentially fill up on slots, especially as you are trying to gear up your character when they hit 80 for the first time. So one of the major ways is the renowned vendors. Each faction has a renowned vendor. That renowned vendor has, generally speaking, at least one veteran track piece of gear that you can buy. I believe you can get shoulders from Dornagal, a headpiece from Ashkajet, from Ring Deeps. Hallowfall's a chest piece, and Ashkajet, I think, is a waist. And you can go there and you can buy these pieces of gear. They are 584 veteran track. They do require a little bit of crystals, but generally speaking, they could be good options if you're struggling to fill in on a slot, or you're close to hitting a threshold to enter into content or try something, and you basically want to kind of like push that button, or so to say. Now, of course, there's also the delve vendors. So these will use underground coins. These coins basically are currency you earn from doing delves and can be used to purchase 580 gear. I don't recommend it, but again, it's just gear that you can use to fill in on slots that maybe you don't have. So then the final method of obtaining gear, but a very niche one, is crafting. Now crafting is a difficult one because you have two very important resources you have to make. So firstly, you have to have Sparks of Omen. Sparks of Omen, you earn 1 fractured spark per week, so you can only craft 1 every 2 weeks. And these are very important because these are used to upgrade your purple gear. And your purple gear is the gear that you can upgrade to the highest max level of 636. To do this, though, you need runes or weathered or gilded crests from the appropriate content. So you can't just be a crafter and craft 636, you have to be a crafter that does mythic raiding. I will cover this in a little bit more detail, but because of this, it is a little bit difficult to say that, you have an easy solution here. It's not necessarily the easiest way to create gear. So then, finally, obviously we can talk a little bit about the actual upgrading of gear. Now, upgrading your gear is a process that you can do at an upgrade vendor, and it will require two materials. It will require Valorstones and crests. Now, for upgrading your gear, it will depend on the track, but the crests will be allocated according to track. So, for example, for veteran gear, you will need to have the carved crests. For higher level veteran gear, you need to have ruined crests. For heroic, or should I say hero track gear, you need ruined, etc. So the crest will scale up, the Valorstone price will scale up. Once you have a piece of gear that is of a higher item level, upgrading gear below that item level all becomes discounted. So for example, if I pick up a headpiece that's 603, upgrading any headpiece below that on any character will drop in price. So it's an account-wide thing, it's really cool, it just helps you with upgrading other characters and saving on a bit of Valorstones. In terms of upgrading your gear, I highly suggest you only upgrade basically veteran or champion gear from like the beginning. Realistically, it's not worth it for you to upgrade anything else because it's not necessarily something that's ideal for you. So I highly suggest you only upgrade veteran gear in the beginning, because this is gear you can make set pieces, which we'll talk about now, but mainly champion gear. Especially mainly champion gear, because this is kind of where you're starting to hit that threshold of higher level gear, and saving your crests is good for that. Remember, you can always turn more powerful crests into lesser ones, but you can't take lesser crests and turn them into more powerful ones. So be careful when you do that. And then finally, in terms of converting, you can convert any veteran track piece of gear or higher into a set piece. You cannot convert veteran track gear that comes from weekly caches outside the pinnacle cache, which is why none of it's showing up for me. Now, in terms of converting set pieces, you should only convert pieces that you have in champion rank, and you should only convert pieces that you have within basically like for your spec to complete your set bonus. Never ever convert anything else. The charges come every 2 weeks, so they're very rare. And that's that. That is gearing in World of Warcraft. I hope this has covered everything you need to know, and let me know in the comments down below. Bye.